believe that they will not be scientific. I love you. Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Well, I suppose it's fair and appropriate to call it Russiagate, the claim that somehow, in some way, Russia influenced the outcome of the recent American election. The claims are constant, loud, and often shrill. This narrative has generated a lot of heat, but preciously little light. Cross-talking Russiagate, I'm joined by my guest Don DeBar in New York. He's an anti-war activist and host of a daily radio program. In Des Moines, we have Paul Street. He's an independent writer and political activist, as well as author of the book They Rule, The 1% versus Democracy. And in Phoenix, we cross to Josh Bernstein. He's a television talk show host. All right, gentlemen, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Don, let me go to you first here. We've seen this, what I call Russiagate, which I guess is appropriate. We've seen it kind of inched along for the last 8 months, and there's preciously little evidence, conclusive evidence. There's a lot of innuendo. There's a lot of, I would say, rumors. And we have a lot of leaks, which I find the mainstream media and the Democrats, they don't really want to talk about where these leaks came from. And that is the only concrete thing that we know that exists. Something was leaked. What is this narrative really all about? And are we still litigating the outcome of the 2016 presidential election? Because if we are, we're in trouble. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, we are in trouble, too, because it leads nowhere good. What's happened, essentially, is that beginning with the Clinton campaign in particular, the sort of negative publicity that was being generated towards Russia that had been building over a period of a few years suddenly became the essence of her campaign against Donald Trump. There was the picking up by Marco Rubio against Trump in the Republican primaries, accusing Trump of being Putin's stooge, a Russian puppet, and all of this. Now, Rubio was looking to score big in Florida. He comes out of the anti-Castro Cuban community, so there's a little more resonance there, and I guess he thought that that would stick, and it didn't. And Clinton picked it right up when Trump became the presumptive nominee and then the nominee. And as Trump tried to stake out foreign policy positions that were distinct. This, even if rhetorically, he certainly did stake out foreign policy positions that were distinct from that which had been in process for decades. And then suddenly he became the focal point of a massive attack across the media from what some people are calling the deep state, but from inside the political establishment of both parties, and of course the Clinton campaign piling on. That way, the Democrats didn't have to offer anything to their constituents like single-payer health care or other things that they want, but rather could point to Trump along with the other things that came out of his mouth. He's an Islamophobe, he's a racist, etc., and say he's Putin's stooge.
Okay. Paul, one of the things here is that we have all of these accusations and suggestions that there is a collusion, a Manchurian candidate here. And again, I have looked at the reports that have come out, and again, they're just kind of summations of accusations and assessments here. In one of the reports, the DNI report, 7 pages of 25 were devoted to the television station you're on right now, which I find that really peculiar, okay? I hope you don't have any consequences now, because it was in a report. And actually, it was factually, a lot of things were wrong. They were open, you can open source it here. What do you think is in play here? I know you're not a big fan of the president here, but you're worried about this narrative. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, well, there's just a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's no smoking gun. A lot of vague and unsubstantiated sort of allegations from murky sources. And, beneath all of that, I think there's a different kind of agenda, and I think there's a number of factors in play. The Democratic Party in the United States has long been invested in a new Cold War. This goes back to Bill Clinton. There's a lot of money involved in the militarization of Eastern Europe. There's a long-standing sort of Council on Foreign Relations, establishment foreign policy concern with rolling back Russian power and keeping Russia defensive. I think that the narrative of Russian interference in our supposedly great democracy, I mean, that's kind of a joke right there, that assumption. There's sort of an open plutocracy been going on in this country for a long time. There's a partisan Democratic desire to delegitimize Trump from the very beginning, and this is perceived as useful in that regard. There's also a kind of dog ate my homework kind of impulse behind this whole thing. We didn't lose the presidential election because we ran a terrible corporate centrist, Wall Street, neoliberal, wooden candidate named Hillary Clinton. No, we didn't lose it because we've abandoned the American working class over 2-3 decades, right? We lost it because the Russians interfered and stole the election. So this is, among other things, kind of a way of keeping the Sanders forces and the progressive single-payer forces within the Democratic Party at bay, right, with this claim that the Russians did. There's a reluctance to take on serious substances issues of class and race and ecology because the Democratic Party's got a problem with those too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Josh, can you weigh in there too, because these claims have consequences. Okay, they have consequences, and I worry about the future of the country because, again, I stressed in the beginning, there are a lot of leaks coming out of the state right now. The deep state, I think, is appropriate here, and there doesn't seem to be much interest in that. I think that is the real danger here. After 8 months of all of these investigations and all of this reporting, nothing has come up of substance whatsoever. A man lost his job because he got tapped and he was revealed illegally, and we know that also other players may be facing the same situation here. What we have heard from the intelligence community in Congress here. I mean, this could be just the beginning. So this could flip here, but the media isn't taking it, at least not the corporate media. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, first and foremost, I just wanted to send my thoughts and prayers out to the victims of the UK Parliament attack. But getting back to what we were talking about, look, there's no question that they needed a Russian boogeyman. And they saw, like Paul said, that they had an old establishment, corrupt politician who had a very tough relationship with the truth. And therefore, we saw what happened with Project Veritas and the WikiLeaks, and we were able to expose all of that information. But you're right. The true story here should be the fact that James Comey himself has testified that there is no pertinent information or evidence pertaining to the fact that the Russians interfered. That's number one. A former Attorney General, Michael Mukasey, said that there was surveillance at some point. You know about the FISA courts. In June of 2016, they went to the FISA court on the direction of Barack Obama through the Attorney General Loretta Lynch. They were denied. They went back again in October, and it was accepted. Now we also have Project Umbrage, which is basically the CIA masquerading and having them, cover up, if you will, different IP addresses to make them look like they're coming from outside of the confines of the United States. That's a program that they have out there. And now we have the newest program, the Hammer, which is by the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, as well as the former Director of the CIA in John Brennan. They came up with a supercomputer program that also does the hacking. And now, to top it all off, the ice cream and the whipped cream and the cherry on top, we now have Devin Nunes coming out with his testimony saying that clearly there was some type of wiretapping and spying that was going on President Trump, candidate Trump, and President-elect Trump at the time.
You know, Don, I want to follow up with what Josh just said there, because we have an outgoing president changing the rules of the game. And there is, from what we've heard recently from Nunes, you know, we could have had an outgoing president spying on the opposition party, on the president-elect and his team. That it makes Watergate look small in my mind. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you have to keep in mind also about Watergate is that it came at a time of détente with Russia and China and the United States. And some speculate that the détente that Nixon and his crew reached with Russia, with the Soviet Union and China, was the impetus for some deep state forces at that time taking down his presidency, forgetting the stupid things that his people did.
Well, no, Don.
That's not the case now.
No, Don. No,
you know,
Don. Let's be clear. Hey, Don. Let's be clear. There is ample evidence, irrefutable evidence, that the Nixon administration broke the law. Okay, encouraged perjury. There was
yes, absolutely
lying,
true.
Obstruction of justice. It was all there. But
on tape.
But the difference is that this was investigated by real journalists connecting real dots. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Let me go to Paul before we go to the break.
That's
here.
True.
Paul, this is what really bothers me. We're almost running out of time here in the first half here. You know, Paul, this is what bothers me, is this innuendo all of the time, and it is a form of McCarthyism. And you know, again, if you don't like Trump, that's okay, but this is damaging the system itself. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, right. I mean, the average American Joe and Jane six-pack has absolutely no idea.
Yep.
You know, and that's sort of on purpose. This all on both sides sort of takes on a character, from my perspective, of the Matador's cape, right? I mean, this week in Trump and this week in Russiagate, and meanwhile, 24 million people are about to be kicked off of health care. The top 10%, the top 10th of the top 1% owns more than 90% of the wealth in this country, and livable ecology, you know, is absolutely at lethal risk right now, particularly with this administration.
Gentlemen, I'm going to jump in.
It was before.
I'm going to jump in. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on Russiagate. Stay, Dorothy.
I love you.
සැනින් එසැනින් සියල්ලගෙන එන ඔබේ ජීවිතය අලුත් කරන ප්‍රවෘත්තියක වටිනාකම
TV1 News හැමදාම රාත්‍රී 8ට
I love you.
Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter LaBelle. To remind you, we're discussing Russiagate. Okay, I'd like to go back to Josh in Phoenix here. Josh, I have no idea how this is all going to come out. I got Brexit wrong. I got the election wrong. So I'm no longer a crystal ball here. So I'll just try to be thoughtful, okay? Josh, what I think is really dangerous right now is that the media and the liberal Democrats, they're putting all of their eggs in one basket. And given the last 8 months, where, again, evidence is so flimsy, they're looking for a major disaster and another epic failure that the media experienced with the election and the Democratic Party. I worry what they're going to do next when they can't look at the mirror and say they got it wrong again. All right. Again, as Don has pointed out, you know, we're looking at two countries that are heavily armed and are in an adversarial position right now. This doesn't bode well because you're angry that you got something wrong. It's like children on a playground picking up their marbles and leaving. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, look, I think the Russians are smart enough to understand that most of this is just politics. I do believe that the Democrats, although they may not want to restart the Cold War necessarily, that their rhetoric, as it continues, could certainly cool off the relationship. I think that they've also done this to make it that much harder for President Trump to have a good standing relationship. But look, let's be real frank here, okay? The Russians didn't delete 33,000 emails. Hillary Clinton's campaign and Hillary Clinton did. The Russians did not feed questions to CNN. Donna Brazil did. Okay, the Russians did not, basically make sure that the primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders. No, Hillary Clinton did all that. So she can't blame anybody but herself and her campaign. The bottom line is the Democrats refused to take responsibility for running the candidate that they ran. And look, they got beat because the American people were able to see through the lies, the corruption, the rhetoric. And now, thankfully, we have a president that is going to make America great again, that's going to do the things that he needs to do. And the sad part is that his biggest competition, his biggest competitors, if you will, and adversaries aren't necessarily the Democrats, unfortunately. They are the House and the Senate Republicans. And as I said a couple of weeks ago on a couple of shows, the Republicans will fight against President Trump more in the first 100 days than they ever did against Barack Obama in 8 years. And that is a travesty.
You know, Don, I have a theory, okay? Going back to the what we heard from Congressman Nunes, reflecting upon when on that, I guess it was a Sunday morning, a weekend morning, where Trump was on Twitter saying I was wiretapped by Obama. When I saw that, I thought that was a blockbuster. I thought, whoa, you better have some evidence here. And then he was on Tucker Carlson, and he said in about a week or so there'll be some information released. I think that Nunes did release that, and I think maybe the Trump team knew this was coming down the pike, knowing that over that week, about a week period, that the media was going to churn itself into a cauldron, and now they potentially, media and the Democrats, have egg on their face. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, big egg. You know, looking at all of the things that are going on, around Russiagate and all of it, a lot of it is virtual reality in a way. It's political squabbling. It's people positioning for power. It's nothing that really changes the direction of policy in any place, although that change in direction might be implied by the results of various political reconfigurations. But what's real is that for the last 20-some-odd years, since the beginnings really of the Clinton administration, the United States and NATO have been moving military hardware and personnel forward up to Russia's borders and forward up to China's borders to where now the two are encircled from the Baltics to the Korean Peninsula with hot anti-ballistic missile systems, all kinds of material still being piped in. That has continued. And while we have HUAC 2.0, this House Intelligence Committee hearings that took place on the 20th, this past Monday, going on, with them talking about, let's now investigate, well, first of all, that Russia attacked our election, and that was an act of war. That's what one of them said the other day. Now, we're looking at, and they were talking about, what's her name, Shaheen up in New Hampshire, Senator Jean Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, has said that Russia's propaganda has a body count. Well, I live in Ossining, New York. That's where Sing Sing prison is. That's where the Rosenbergs were executed. Okay? I knew Lynn Stewart. Lynn Stewart did 4 years out of a 10-year prison sentence because she held a press conference. Okay? I source Russian media, among other places, as a journalist, and I appear here, for example, to communicate my views. I'm very nervous about the outcome of what's happening right now, personally.
You know, Paul, one outcome, a very likely outcome, is just another 4 years of just gridlock. The fervor and the poisonous attitude that the Democrats have and the media have towards this president. And there's a lot of reasons why you don't like, one person can dislike Donald Trump, but we could do a separate program on that. That's fine. But using this issue of Russia to cloud his administration, to slow it down, to weaken it, doesn't do anyone any good, does it?
Well, you know, I'm not quite sure what the Democrats' card is here. I don't know what they think they're going to get out of it. If they think it's going to lead to impeachment, A, they have this huge evidence problem. There's no smoking gun yet. And B, they've got a Republican-controlled Congress. You know, which I think is probably pretty much going to conclude that Joe and Jane Sixpack are not going to get embedded enough with all these the shadowy issues to really get behind the notion that Trump ought to be removed. Now, if they think it's going to play for them in 2018 and 2020 in an electoral sense, I think they're probably backing themselves into a corner here, and it's really quite extraordinary. I mean, if Democrats want to be remotely progressive and fight on issues that matter, they're sort of losing it here. Yeah. They're diverting what ought to be their own agenda. I mean, Rex Tillerson is a problem not because he was a high priest of climate denial and because he was the head of, you know, one of the leading forces behind climate change and global warming, but because he's perceived as too close to Russia. Jeff Sessions is a problem, not because he has a long record of racially discriminatory prosecution and all kinds, but because he had a meeting with a Russian sometime. Yeah. I mean, that's just not going to work. They're destroying themselves as a party by going down this path. They're diverting themselves.
Okay, I wonder what's going to happen to me. I talk to Russians every single day. Okay, Josh, you brought up a point. I went into the studio 15 minutes after AP called the election for Trump, and I wasn't even prepared for it. I was really quite flabbergasted. But you know what the first thing came to my mind, and as you brought it up on this program, are congressional Republicans, particularly the Senate. And this really bothers me when McCain, Lindsey Graham, people like that, they bother me a lot because they're no friend of this president. I don't see that they're really a friend of the Republican Party at all. Rand Paul, I sometimes have to wonder where he stands too. You know, the issues here within the Republican Party itself are very troubling because they could, if the impeachment word is mentioned, I pretty much know where those two senators are going to stand. Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. I think a lot of people, on paper, yes, the Republicans actually have control of the Senate. But do they really have control of the Senate? If you add in John McCain, if you add in Jeff Flake, if you add in Lindsey Graham, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and then you have the two socialists, basically, you've got Bernie Sanders and Angus King, do you really have control of the Senate? So, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, and I've said this many, many times before, but in some respects, we live in a post-constitutional America run by executive fiat. Now, I know that's a scary, scary statement, but if you think about it, it's kind of true.
It's probably true.
The only way that President Trump is ever really getting to be able to do some of the things that he's been able to do is unfortunate through executive order. Now, who do I blame for that? Do I blame the transformationalist president in Barack Obama, who said he was going to fundamentally transform America? No, I blame the House and Senate Republicans for not having enough of a backbone to stand up to the executive branch. They, unfortunately, have created the environment in which we now are working through in Washington. And I really hope that the House and Senate Republicans understand that the people did not vote to keep you in power. You grabbed onto the coattails of the 45th President, Donald J. Trump.
Very good point. You know, Don, another worry I have here is that they're not going to go after these leakers, these people that were hanger-ongers from the Obama administration. Logic would dictate that's where it's coming from. I hope that Ben Rhodes is put in front under oath to explain what he did and what he knew about all of this. And Barack Obama himself, I mean, the flurry of activity. I mean, he did more stuff in the last 2 weeks of his administration than he did for 8 years. Okay, go ahead, Don. I'll let you finish the program. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, right now at the Justice Department, you have Sessions having recused himself from everything that has to do with any of this stuff. And the number 2 person, Mary McCord, is someone that was appointed first as a U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. by Bill Clinton, and then brought to the Justice Department proper by Barack Obama, made the, at the time, assistant deputy in charge of national security, Homeland Security, which made her the person in charge of conducting the original Russiagate stuff, and then she became the senior person for Homeland Security in October by Barack Obama. So this person who's actually running these on behalf of the Justice Department is a Clinton-Obama appointee. When Trump has his own people in there, then we can see whether or not there'll actually be prosecutions.
We'll see if
remember, his rallies.
We've run out of time, gentlemen. We've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests in New York, Des Moines, and in Phoenix. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.
I love you.